So I definitely had an experience today of very slow progress in the garden. And this was because there had literally been minimal to no gardening done in the last 10 weeks. And you might say, well, why was that? Were you just being really lazy, Tom? Were you just like, hey, decided to give up because it's winter, so things are growing a little bit more slowly? But what actually happened was one morning I woke up and my whole shoulder was just in severe pain, like nasty, nasty pain. And for those of you who perhaps are a little younger than 45, then you may not have experienced this yet, but I couldn't find a trigger. I couldn't remember a cause. Just woke up with severe shoulder pain, severe. And in fact, my index finger is still numb. The pain is significantly better. I've had a truckload of work done. I've had acupuncture, osteopathy, massage. I've had an MRI. The MRI came at 10 weeks and actually probably 9 weeks, and I got it back. It was a little bit worse than I was expecting, actually a lot worse. I thought my neck was in pretty good condition. I typically have done a significant amount of a neck-specific meditation called Turtle Longevity Qigong second form. It's got a lot of neck work in it. And this MRI comes back and says, hey, you've got foraminal compression or narrowing at C4 and C6, as well as a disc tear with disc material pushing on C6. And that's presumably what's giving me this index finger numbness. But during this time, my major concern was looking after myself. For the initial 3 weeks or so, everything was extremely difficult, like literally everything. I had to weigh it up and say, hey, how much is this email really worth? How important is this actually to do? Because every keystroke was an exercise in pain. And over that time since then, it's got a lot better. I had a flare up at around week 7 and it got bad for another 2 weeks. And that's what led to the MRI. If it just got better, I probably wouldn't have. But whether I played a bit too much tennis or I did some heavy lifting, maybe even I did some gardening, could well have been, but it flared it right up. Today, I went back to the garden. 10 weeks of not much having been done. My son has done a little bit, but the amount of growth was significantly more than it appeared. It was deceptively more. I've got the brush cutter out and the battery runs out in half the time because the amount of work that it was having to do to go into this much longer, thicker grass. And so then I took out the hedger, and I'm at war with the lily pillies. Like this hedge had clearly had the chance to extensively grow, and it meant that some of the branches were too thick just to go through at the end of the hedger, and instead had to be brought right to the end and fighting, and it's jamming, and it's all a lot more work. It was a lot more work. It took longer. It was exhausting. And this was a very interesting thing, that if systems, let's call the idea of looking after the garden as a system, that every week, every 2 weeks, something like that, it would be a good idea for me to brush cut the grass and cut the hedges. And if not me, somebody else. That job could have been done by somebody else. But because it was not done for 10 weeks, the amount of work that it took to recover it back was substantially more than if it had been done regularly. And this plays out in business as well. We're seeing this right now where systems have been put on hold for 2 years and the backlogs are significant. I've spoken about this in the past in terms of these live videos that I've been doing, that the risks of shutting down systems makes catching up very difficult. Number one, you have to work a system more than 100% to clear any backlog, which in itself is very challenging. So you might have to run a surgery on a Saturday and a Sunday, and that's going to give you 2 days back. But you're also going to be careful because you're going to exhaust your staff. You're going to put your surgeons at risk. There is a cost to running a system at more than 100%. Second problem, which we are potentially seeing, is that skills degrade. And often people haven't written down the instructions, or the instructions no longer apply because we've had so much change go in the world. It's like, well, yeah, the procedure that was last used in, let's say, June 2020 before all the lockdowns, hey, that was great back then, but now the world has changed and that provider's not available, that supplier's gone broke, that system, that where we used to get the materials, that's no longer available. And so these procedures have all become out of date. This, unfortunately, means that we're likely to continue from more systems problems, from more delays, from more difficulties, from on surge experiences, where backlogs of things suddenly release and there's huge demand, but there's no ability to meet that demand because everything was on hold. This is a fascinating comparison compared to just in time, which is what we were largely existing on up until 2020, which was just in time. This had been refined to mastery by Amazon and by Japanese countries like Japanese companies like Toyota. But they do require systems for logistics and systems for computers and systems that notify, hey, we need another one right now. All of these things, you can take them and chuck them out the window because they're not working in 2022. And unfortunately, they're not likely to work for an extended period of time. There was a small hope that perhaps we had been overproducing to such an extent that even with half of the loss of productivity, like literally the world's productivity goes in half, we're making half as much stuff, that we were making so much that actually didn't make a difference. And surprisingly, there may be aspects of that are true. That if we could just sort out the supply chain issues, then a lot of things might get better. But, I've also heard stories of cars being shipped without microprocessors because we just don't have them. That trying to buy a bike at the moment is still very difficult. That these problems more represent system failures. And when we are facing this situation, a company or a business that knows how to work systems will have a significant advantage, not just because they can run systems faster, better, cleaner, and avoid major mistakes, but also because they can see clearly what that system is about and what it's meant to do. It's going to allow far better innovation, far better ability to find a second path or a third path to get the job done when the initial path is blocked. This is a hidden benefit of systems. That if you understand systems well, then when a process in that system breaks down, you have a far better opportunity to look at the whole thing and go, oh, wow, okay, that's gone. We can't do anything about that. This is a problem that's outside of our control. So what are we going to do? Okay, well, what about if we move this here? What about if we got that there and then we did this here? These processes, this thinking is all significantly easier if you know what you're doing with systems. If you need some help with it, if you're like, you know what, perhaps we are coming into some difficult times, that I'm going to need my team to be on point with increased productivity and increased ability to solve problems that other companies are going to be stuck in because they just don't get systems. If that's you, head over to systemio.dev. Let's have a conversation, look at how we can work together to get your business more systemized, more operationally robust, and able to cope with the coming difficulties. All right, look forward to seeing you on the next episode as we continue this journey into Power Systems Create Results. See you then.